The scraping of metal against stone echoed through the abandoned cathedral, and Lorali pressed her scarred palm against her mouth to muffle her breathing. 3 years of living as a rejected Omega in the Shadowmere Pack had taught her to move like smoke, exist like a ghost. But nothing had prepared her for this. Through a crack in the rotting confessional, she watched Alpha King Thaddeus Ravencrest kneel in the center of the nave, blood seeping through his midnight robes. His guards lay motionless around him, not dead. She could hear their heartbeats, but frozen in some twisted supernatural sleep. "Don't speak." The ancient warning carved into the cathedral door had said, "Don't speak, or he will hear you." The whispering butcher. Even thinking the name made her bones ache, a creature that hunted by sound, drawn to voices like a moth to flame. Once it heard you speak, it could track you anywhere, through any shadow, past any barrier. Thaddeus's chest heaved with labored breaths. The ambush had been perfect. Lure the Alpha King to neutral territory for peace negotiations, then unleash something that even his legendary strength couldn't fight. But they hadn't counted on her being here, scavenging in the ruins for herbs to sell at the Omega Market. Another scrape. Closer. The thing moved wrong. She caught glimpses through the broken, stained glass windows. Too many joints in its limbs. A head that twisted completely around as it listened. Fingers that ended in needles designed to pierce through throats and steal voices forever. Thaddeus's golden eyes, eyes that had once looked through her like she was nothing when her mate rejected her in front of his entire court, now searched the darkness desperately. His mouth opened, ready to call for help. "No." Lyrelai burst from her hiding spot, her bare feet silent on the stone as 3 years of abuse had taught her to be. She crossed the 20 feet between them in heartbeats and clamped both hands over his mouth just as the first syllable began to form. His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in rage. The most powerful alpha in 7 kingdoms being silenced by a nobody, a rejected Omega who cleaned floors and emptied chamber pots. His hands came up to grip her wrists, strong enough to shatter bone. But then the whispering butcher's head snapped toward them. Click, click, click. The sound of its needle fingers tapping together as it listened. Waiting. Hungry. She held Thaddeus's gaze, shaking her head frantically. Her own throat burned with the need to explain, to warn him properly. But one word, just one word, and they were both dead. The king's grip on her wrists loosened slightly. Intelligence flickered in those golden depths as he began to understand. His nostrils flared, and she knew he was scenting her. Not just the Omega markers that made her worthless in their world, but something else. The thing she'd hidden since birth, suppressed more carefully these last 3 years since her rejection. The scent of the Void Walker bloodline, the cursed wolves who could move through shadows and silence, hunted to near extinction because their immunity to alpha commands made them dangerous. The bloodline that would have made her valuable if anyone knew she carried it. But revealing it now would mean death just as surely as speaking. The butcher moved closer, its twisted form casting impossible shadows in the moonlight. One of the frozen guards whimpered in his spelled sleep. Such a tiny sound, barely audible. The creature's head whipped toward him with the crack of breaking vertebrae. Lyrelai didn't think. She threw herself sideways, pulling Thaddeus with her as the butcher's needle fingers whistled through the air where his head had been. They struck the stone altar behind them, carving through marble like butter. Pain exploded across her back. 3 lines of fire where the tips had caught her, shallow but bleeding. She bit through her own tongue to keep from screaming, copper filling her mouth. Thaddeus's arms came around her, not to push her away, but to roll them behind a pillar as the butcher's attention fixed on the guard who had whimpered. The wet sound that followed would haunt her forever, but she kept her hands pressed over the king's mouth, even as her blood dripped onto his perfect face. In the darkness behind the pillar, pressed against the cold stone and the warm, solid body of the Alpha King, Lyrelei felt time slow. His heartbeat thundered against her chest. His scent, pine and lightning and something anciently powerful, overwhelmed her senses. But there was something else in his scent now. Recognition. His hands moved to her face, tilting it up in the darkness. His eyes glowed with alpha power as he studied her features. She saw the exact moment he remembered. A trembling Omega girl 3 years ago, dressed in her best dress that was still rags compared to court finery. Standing before his throne as her mate, Beta Marcus of Shadowmere rejected her publicly. "I reject you, Lyralee Night Whisper. You are nothing. Less than nothing." And Thaddeus had said nothing. Done nothing. Just watched with those cold, golden eyes as her world shattered. She'd heard whispers later that his sister, Princess Cassandra, had laughed from her seat beside the throne, calling it entertainment. Now those same golden eyes held something that looked almost like regret? The butcher's clicking grew closer. It had finished with the guard. Now it searched, listening for any sound, any breath, any heartbeat out of rhythm. Thaddeus's hand moved to the wound on her back, and she felt the warm tingle of alpha healing power, but she grabbed his wrist, shaking her head violently. Healing magic had sound, tiny whispers of power that most couldn't hear. But the whispering butcher wasn't most. She pressed her forehead against his, trying to communicate through touch and scent what she couldn't with words. "Wait. Trust me. I know these creatures. I've survived them before." Because that was her secret, wasn't it? The real reason she'd been in the cathedral. She'd been tracking the butcher for weeks, studying it, learning its patterns. The rejected Omega who everyone ignored could go places no one else could. She'd discovered the plot against the Alpha King 3 days ago, but who would believe her? Who would listen to rejected trash? So she'd come here herself, thinking maybe she could leave a warning, disrupt the ambush somehow. She'd never intended to save him directly, never intended to end up bleeding in his arms while death clicked its way closer through the darkness. The butcher's shadow fell across their hiding spot. One sound, one single sound, and it was over. Thaddeus's hand tightened on her waist, and she felt him make a decision. His mouth moved against her palm. Not to speak, but to press the softest kiss against her scarred skin. A promise, an apology, a question. Then he did something that changed everything. He submitted. The Alpha King, who had never bowed to anyone, tucked his head against her neck in the universal gesture of wolf submission, trusting her, choosing her, following the lead of someone his own sister had once called waste. The whispering butcher's talon touched her shoulder, trailing along the wound it had made earlier. Testing, tasting, deciding. 6 hours before the cathedral, before blood and silence and impossible choices, Lyrelei had knelt in the servants' quarters scrubbing Beta Marcus's boots. Her former mate liked to make her clean them while he wore them, standing over her as she worked. "Missed a spot, worthless," he sneered, deliberately stepping on her fingers. She didn't cry anymore. Tears had dried up after the first year, but her wolf, Nixa, stirred restlessly within her. "Let me out. Let me show him what we really are." "No," Lyrelei responded silently. "We stay hidden. We survive." "The Alpha King arrives tomorrow," Marcus continued, grinding his heel harder. "His sister, Princess Cassandra, accompanies him. Both for the peace summit with the Northern Pax. You're to stay in the servant tunnels. If their majesties have to look upon your pathetic face, it might ruin their appetites." Lyrelei kept her head down, continuing to scrub. But Nixa caught something in Marcus's scent, excitement mixed with fear, deception. That night, while the pack celebrated the coming royal visit, she slipped through the shadows using her Voidwalker gifts. The bloodline everyone thought was extinct, diluted to nothing in her veins. They were wrong. It had just been sleeping, waiting, growing stronger in the darkness of her rejection. 23 years she'd carried this secret, her mother's dying wish that she keep it hidden until the world was ready. She heard them in the beta's study, Marcus and two others she didn't recognize by scent. "The butcher is already in place," one said. "The cathedral is perfect. Sacred ground where the Alpha King can't fully shift." "And the payment?" Marcus asked. "Enough gold to make you Alpha of Shadowmere once Thaddeus is dead. The Northern Pacts have no love for the Ravencrest line." "What about witnesses?" "The butcher leaves none. It will look like he broke the ancient laws by speaking in a silent sanctuary. The creature only takes those who break the old rules." "And his sister?" "Princess Cassandra has her own arrangements with us. She'll support your claim to Shadowmere in exchange for certain considerations." Lyrelei had fled then, her mind racing. She'd tried to warn the Pax Gamma, but he'd backhanded her for speaking without permission. She'd tried to leave a note, but servants weren't allowed to write, punishable by the removal of fingers. So she'd done the only thing she could. She'd gone to the cathedral herself. Now, in the present, with the butcher's razor touch tracing her wounds, she remembered something else from her mother's stories before she died. Voidwalkers weren't just silent runners. They were silence incarnate. They could create bubbles of absolute soundlessness, places where even the whispering butcher couldn't hunt. But using that power would reveal what she was. The king would know. Marcus would know. Everyone would know. The talon pressed deeper, drawing fresh blood. Thaddeus tensed beneath her, his alpha instincts screaming to protect, to fight. But he held still, trusting her even as her blood dripped steadily onto his throat. "Forgive me, Mother," Lyrelei thought, and reached for the power she'd buried for over 2 decades. The world went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of absolute absence of sound that made ears ring and hearts skip. Her Voidwalker power expanded outward like a bubble, encompassing her, Thaddeus, and the frozen guards. The whispering butcher reeled backward, its head spinning in confused circles. For the first time in centuries, it couldn't hear anything. Couldn't hunt. Couldn't feed. But the power cost her. Blood poured from her nose, her ears. Years of suppressing her true nature meant her body wasn't ready for this. She was burning herself out, spending life force she couldn't spare. Thaddeus caught her as she swayed, his mouth moving in what might have been her name. No sound emerged in the void bubble, but she read his lips. He knew her name. The Alpha King knew the name of a rejected servant. She had minutes, maybe less, before the power consumed her entirely. Already her vision was graying at the edges, but she forced herself to stand, to grab Thaddeus's hand, and to pull him toward the door. The butcher followed, drawn by movement now instead of sound, but slower, uncertain. Its talons scraped sparks from the stone as it searched for vibrations, for anything to track. They made it to the doorway before Lyrelei's legs gave out. The void bubble flickered. Sound rushed back in, their heartbeats, their breathing, the butcher's inhuman shriek of hunger. But they were at the door now, at the carved warning. And Lyrelei remembered the rest of her mother's story. The whispering butcher was bound by ancient laws. It could only hunt within sacred spaces where silence was commanded. Cross the threshold, and they were free. She shoved Thaddeus with the last of her strength, pushing him over the carved boundary. But her own body wouldn't move. Too much blood lost, too much power spent. The butcher's claws found her shoulder, lifting her off the ground like a broken doll. Its face, God's. Its face was nothing but mouth and teeth and endless hunger, lowered toward her throat. "This is how I die," she thought with strange calm. "At least I saved him. At least my worthless life meant something." Then Thaddeus Ravencrest, Alpha King of 7 Kingdoms, did something that shattered every law of their kind. He stepped back across the threshold, back into the creature's domain. His partial shift was magnificent, not the full wolf that sacred ground prevented, but enough. Claws that could rend steel, fangs that had won 100 battles, eyes that blazed with the power of ancient alpha bloodlines. He tore into the butcher with savage precision, each strike designed to cripple, not kill. Because killing it here would curse the sacred ground forever. "Release her," he commanded, and even the butcher, immune to most magic, flinched at the pure alpha command in his voice. "She is under my protection." The creature dropped her, more from surprise than obedience. In all its centuries of hunting, no one had ever come back for prey. Thaddeus caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest as he backed toward the threshold again. The butcher followed, its talons clicking in frustration. "You break the old laws, King Wolf," it whispered, its voice like grinding glass, speaking in the silence. "Fighting on sacred ground, the girl is forfeit." "Then I offer a trade," Thaddeus said, and Lyra Lee's eyes widened in horror as she realized what he was about to do. "My voice for hers. I spoke first. Take my silence and let her go." "No," she tried to say, but only a whisper of blood came out. The butcher tilted its head, considering. An Alpha King's voice was worth 1,000 normal souls, but then its mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. "Lies, King Wolf." The girl spoke first. "I heard her power words, her void calling. She owes the silence." Thaddeus looked down at her, and something fierce crossed his features. "Then you'll have to go through me to collect." He turned and ran, carrying her in his arms, crossing the threshold just as the butcher's claws whistled through the air behind them. They tumbled onto unconsecrated ground, gasping and bleeding but alive. For now, the healing chambers of Shadowmere Pack reeked of betrayal. Lyrelei woke to find herself not in the servants' infirmary, but in the royal guest suite, laid out on silk sheets that cost more than she'd see in 10 lifetimes. Thaddeus sat beside her bed, still wearing his blood-stained robes, arguing with Beta Marcus and Pack Alpha Fenris. "Absolutely unacceptable." Marcus's voice cracked with rage. "That thing is a rejected Omega. She has no right to royal treatment." "That thing saved my life," Thaddeus cut him off, his voice deadly quiet. "And she bears the Voidwalker bloodline." "Do you know what that means, Beta?" Silence. Then Marcus, stammering. "The Voidwalkers are extinct. She's just worthless." She created a perfect silence bubble. Only true Voidwalkers can do that. Thaddeus stood, and even from the bed, Lyrelei could feel his alpha presence filling the room. "Which means one of two things. Either you rejected a mate of impossible rare bloodline out of ignorance, or you knew exactly what she was, and rejected her anyway to keep her power suppressed." The temperature in the room dropped. Alpha Fenris stepped forward, elderly but still commanding. "Your Majesty, surely you understand our position. A Voidwalker in the pack would have drawn attention. The Northern Pack still hunt them. We were protecting—" "You were protecting yourselves," Thaddeus snarled, "and now the Whispering Butcher has marked her. Do you understand what that means?" Lyrelei's hand went to her shoulder, where the butcher's claws had pierced her. The wounds had been healed, but she could feel something wrong beneath the skin, something moving. "The mark allows it to find her anywhere," Thaddeus continued. "It's not bound to the cathedral anymore. The ancient laws are void because she used void power in sacred space. The butcher will come for her, and it will kill anyone in its path." "Then she leaves," Marcus said immediately. "Banish her. Let her draw it away." Thaddeus moved so fast that Marcus hit the wall before anyone saw the king's hand around his throat. "Say that again," the Alpha King whispered. "Suggest abandoning her again. Give me a reason." Lorelei tried to sit up, her voice coming out as barely a rasp. He's right. Everyone turned to stare at her. If I leave, draw it away, you'll all be safe. Thaddeus released Marcus and crossed to her bed in 2 strides. You're not going anywhere. You don't understand, she whispered, her throat still raw. My mother. She was hunted by one of these things once. The mark doesn't just call it. It changes you. Makes you into something it can consume more easily. She lifted her hand, showing them the black veins spreading from the wound. I have maybe 2 days before I become something else. Something wrong. There has to be a way to remove it, Thaddeus insisted. There is. She met his golden eyes, seeing too much care there for someone who'd watched her rejection in silence 3 years ago. You kill the butcher, but they're immortal unless… She paused, remembering her mother's stories. Unless they're killed by someone they've marked who resists the transformation. Someone who stays pure of heart despite the corruption. Then we have 2 days to prepare you, Thaddeus said simply. Prepare me. She almost laughed. I'm untrained, weak. You have the Voidwalker bloodline. You survived 3 years of abuse without breaking. You saved me when you had every reason to let me die. He touched the marks on her shoulder gently, and she shivered at the contact. You're stronger than any wolf I've ever met. Your Majesty, Alpha Fenris interrupted carefully, the pack cannot harbor her. The northern packs are already suspicious about the cathedral incident. If they learn we're protecting a Voidwalker, then it's fortunate she's coming with me, Thaddeus announced, shocking everyone, including Lorelei. As my personal advisor on ancient threats. Advisor? Marcus laughed bitterly. She can barely read. Because you forbade her education after the rejection. Thaddeus's eyes flashed dangerously. Another violation of pack law. Rejected Omegas are to be given basic dignity, not tortured. Lorelei watched the dynamics shift in the room. Fenris calculating political implications, Marcus radiating hatred and fear, and Thaddeus. The king kept looking at her with something she couldn't name. Your Majesty, she said quietly, why are you really doing this? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, because 3 years ago, I failed you. When Marcus rejected you, when you looked at me with those eyes begging for help, for justice, for anything, I did nothing. I told myself it was pack business, not royal concern, but I knew. He stopped, jaw clenching. I knew something was wrong. Your scent, even then, carried power. But I said nothing, did nothing, and you paid for my cowardice. The room went still. An Alpha King admitting fault, admitting cowardice. It was unheard of. So yes, he continued, I'm taking you with me. We'll find a way to break the mark. And when we do, you'll have a choice. Return here to the pack that failed you, or, she whispered, or accept a position in my court. As a true advisor. The northern packs won't dare move against a member of my inner circle, Voidwalker or not. Marcus made a sound of pure rage. You can't be serious. She's my rejected mate. A mate you'll never deserve. Thaddeus cut him off. Then, softer, to Lorelei. The choice is yours. She felt the mark pulse on her shoulder, sending whispers of darkness through her blood. The butcher was out there, hunting, searching. In 2 days, she'd either be dead, transformed into something monstrous, or maybe, just maybe, she'd finally be free. I'll come, she said, meeting the Alpha King's eyes, but on one condition. His eyebrow raised and she saw the hint of a smile. A condition? When this is over, if I survive, I want Marcus stripped of his beta rank. The room exploded in shouts. But Thaddeus's smile became a full grin. Done. That's when they heard it. A clicking in the walls, talons scraping against stone. The whispering butcher had already found her. And worse, it wasn't alone. Through the window, shapes moved in the darkness. Dozens of them, all clicking in unison. Impossible, Fenris breathed. There's only supposed to be one. Unless someone feeds them enough souls, Lyralee said, ice in her veins as the pieces came together. Unless someone's been sacrificing wolves to create an army. She looked at Marcus, saw the guilt in his eyes before he could hide it. You didn't just betray the king, she whispered. You've been feeding the pack to these things, creating more of them. The clicking grew louder, closer. They were surrounded. The first whispering butcher came through the window in a shower of glass and moonlight. Lyralee moved without thinking, her Void Walker instincts overriding 3 years of submission. She grabbed Thaddeus and pulled him into the shadow beneath the bed, just as razor-sharp talons carved through the space where he'd stood. Nobody move, she breathed, so quiet even wolf hearing barely caught it. They hunt by sound, but the new ones, the artificial ones Marcus created, they're different. Unstable. They'll attack anything that makes noise above a whisper. Through the gap beneath the bed, she watched feet scramble. Fenris backed toward the door. Marcus stood frozen in place. And the butchers, gods, there were so many, poured in through windows and walls like liquid nightmare. One of the guards outside screamed. The sound cut off wetly. Thaddeus's hand found hers in the darkness, his thumb tracing her palm. A question. She squeezed back once. Wait. Then twice. Trust me. The mark on her shoulder burned, and suddenly she could feel them all. Every butcher in the building. The original one that had marked her was different from the others. Older, more patient, more intelligent. It was coming up the stairs now, taking its time. The younger ones Marcus had created were rabid, starving. They turned on each other as much as the wolves, talons clashing in sprays of black ichor. Your Majesty, Marcus whispered, we need to... 3 butchers' heads snapped toward him. He ran. They followed. The sounds that came from the hallway made Lyralee's stomach turn, but she felt no sympathy. How many innocent wolves had he fed to these things to create his army? How many had died so he could orchestrate this coup? Alpha Fenris made a break for the other door. He almost made it before one of the creatures caught him, lifting the elderly Alpha like he weighed nothing. But Fenris was old, not weak. His partial shift was swift, claws raking across the creature's face, buying him seconds to speak. The vault, he gasped to Thaddeus. Below the pack house. Your mother's journal. She knew about Voidwalkers. She knew about... The butcher's talons found his throat. Lyralee pressed her face into Thaddeus's shoulder to muffle her sob. Fenris had been kind to her, in his way. Never cruel. Just... distant. Now he was gone. The original butcher entered the room, and the younger ones immediately backed away, clicking in what might have been deference or fear. Its head turned slowly, scanning. Little void girl, it whispered, its voice like wind through graves. I can taste your power in the air. So much stronger than your mother's was. She ran for years before I found her. Will you run too? Mother. The word hit like a physical blow. Her mother had been hunted by this exact creature? Or will you be smart? The butcher continued. Accept the mark's gift. Become like us. Become silence itself. Your king cannot protect you. He's bound by flesh and bone. But we are eternal. Thaddeus's grip on her hand tightened, and she felt his body temperature rise, the precursor to a shift. She pressed against him, holding him still. Not yet. Not yet. A new voice from the doorway. She won't have to choose. Lyralee's blood froze. She knew that voice. Princess Cassandra Ravencrest, the Alpha King's own sister, standing in the doorway in traveling clothes that smelled of Northern Pack territory. "Hello, brother," she said calmly, as if supernatural killers weren't filling the room. "Surprised to see me? You shouldn't be. Who do you think helped Marcus arrange this whole thing?" Thaddeus went rigid beside Lyrelei. "The peace summit was my idea," Cassandra continued. "Getting you to that cathedral, releasing the original butcher from its ancient prison, letting it create spawn. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect a rejected Omega to interfere." Her eyes found their hiding spot. "You can come out, little mouse. They won't attack while I'm here. Marcus wasn't the only one feeding them." Lyrelei felt Thaddeus start to move, but she held him back. Something was wrong. Cassandra's scent was off, corrupted. "You've been letting them feed on you," Lyrelei said, sliding out from under the bed but keeping Thaddeus behind her. "Not killing you, just taking little pieces. That's why they obey you." Cassandra smiled, and her canines were too long, too sharp. "Clever little void girl." "Yes, I've been sharing myself with them for months. Each feeding makes me stronger, less bound by pathetic wolf limitations. Soon, I won't need this flesh at all." "You're insane," Thaddeus growled, finally emerging. "You're our sister." "I'm your father's bastard," Cassandra snarled, legitimized only because he needed spare heirs. Always second, always overlooked. But the Northern Packs promised me something better. Rule alongside them once you're gone. All I had to do was become something new. She stepped forward, and the butchers moved with her like a wave. "Join us, brother. The transformation isn't painful if you accept it. And your little Omega, she's already marked. She's halfway there already." Lyrelei felt the mark pulse, spreading its black veins further up her shoulder. The whispers in her head grew louder. "Let go. Become silence. Become nothing. Become everything." "No," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I know what you become. My mother showed me before she died. You don't become powerful. You become hollow. Empty vessels for something else to wear." The original butcher laughed, a sound like breaking bells. "Your mother was weak. She resisted until the end, died human and screaming. But you have the pure bloodline. You could become something magnificent." "Like what?" Thaddeus stepped partially in front of Lyrelei, protective. "What are you really offering her?" "A queen," the butcher whispered. "Not of wolves, but of the spaces between sounds, the silence that exists before creation and after destruction. She could command every shadow, every quiet moment, every held breath." For a moment, just a moment, Lyrelei felt the temptation. No more rejection, no more pain, no more being nothing. Then she looked at Thaddeus, saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her, and knew her answer. "I'd rather die as nothing than live as your hollow queen." The room exploded into violence. Cassandra shifted fully, but it was wrong, her wolf form corrupted by whatever the butchers had done to her. Too many joints, teeth like needles, moving in ways that hurt to watch. Thaddeus met her head-on, their bodies crashing through furniture. Brother and sister, alpha blood versus corrupted power. The butchers swarmed toward Lyrelei, but she reached deep into her Voidwalker heritage and did something her mother had only done once. She screamed in perfect silence. The paradox of it, sound without sound, voice without voice, created a shockwave that shattered every piece of glass in the room. The younger butchers simply unmade. They dissolved into whispers and shadow, unable to exist in the face of such impossible sound. But the original remained, and now it was angry. "You dare use the old power against me? I, who taught your bloodline the meaning of silence?" It moved faster than thought, talons extended, and struck Thaddeus's back as he threw himself between them. No! Lyrali caught him as he fell, blood pooling beneath them. The talons had gone deep, too deep. The butcher laughed. Now you'll both transform. Together. Isn't that romantic? Cassandra limped over, her corrupted form failing. Finish them. We have what we dash dash. A howl cut through the night. Then another, and another. The royal guard had arrived. Hundreds of wolves, all howling in unison, creating a wall of sound that made the butchers writhe in pain. This isn't over, Cassandra snarled, already retreating. The northern packs are coming. And you're running out of time, little mouse. The mark spreads faster when you use your power. She was right. Lyrali's entire left arm was black now, the corruption spreading toward her heart. As the butchers fled and the royal guard poured in, Lyrali held Thaddeus's unconscious form and made a decision. She would go to the vault, find his mother's journal, and learn how to kill something that couldn't die. The vault beneath Shadowmere Pack contained 3 centuries of secrets, but Lyrale only cared about one. She found it in a locked chest that responded to Thaddeus's blood. Blood she'd carefully collected from his bandages while he lay unconscious in the medical wing. Queen Seraphina Ravencrest's journal was bound in midnight blue leather, its pages filled with elegant script that spoke of terrible knowledge. Day 237 of my research into the Voidwalker bloodlines, one entry began. I've confirmed what the ancient texts suggested. They aren't just shadow walkers or silence makers, they're reality breakers. Their very existence challenges the laws that bind our world. Lyrali read by candlelight, her corrupted arm pulsing with each heartbeat. Time was running out. The sun was already setting. She had maybe 12 hours before the transformation completed. The Whispering Butchers fear them, another entry read. Not because Voidwalkers can hide from them, but because a fully awakened Voidwalker can unmake them entirely. The process requires 3 things: acceptance of one's complete bloodline, a tether to keep them human, and a willing sacrifice of what they value most. A footstep behind her. She spun, void power crackling. Peace, Thaddeus said, raising his hands. He stood in the doorway, shirtless, his chest wrapped in bandages. The guards told me you were here. You should be resting. Those wounds are healing. He moved closer, and she saw the black veins spreading from his injury sites. We match now. The corruption was taking him too. Slower than her, alpha blood provided some resistance, but inevitable. I'm going to fix this, she promised. Your mother's journal. My mother was a voidwalker. The words hung between them like a physical thing. What? Thaddeus sat beside her, his warmth seeping into her cold skin. A diluted bloodline, but yes, that's why she researched it so extensively. Why she really died. Not from illness like we told everyone, but from fighting off a butcher attack when I was young. Then you have the bloodline too. Dormant, barely there, but present. He touched her corrupted arm gently. That's why I can sense you so strongly. Why your rejection 3 years ago felt wrong to my wolf. You felt it? She pulled away, confusion and hurt warring in her chest. You felt that something was wrong and still did nothing? I was a coward, he said simply. My advisors convinced me that interfering with pack justice would make me look weak, that recognizing a rejected Omega would damage royal authority. His golden eyes met hers. I've regretted it every day since. Regret doesn't undo the past. No, but perhaps action can reshape the future. He pulled something from his pocket, a small vial of silvery liquid. Moon water from the sacred springs. My mother's journal mentions it can slow the corruption. She took it, their fingers brushing. Why help me? Your sister was right. I'm nobody. Just a servant who... You're the woman who saved my life, knowing I'd once ignored your pain. You're the last true Voidwalker, carrying blood so pure that ancient monsters fear you. You're... He stopped, jaw clenching. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Before she could respond, alarms began howling throughout the compound. Your Majesty! Captain Garrett of the Royal Guard appeared in the doorway. The northern packs have crossed the border. 3 armies, all marching on Shadowmere, and they have more of those creatures with them. How long? Thaddeus stood, already shifting into king mode. 3 hours at their current pace. Lyrelei looked at the journal, at the moonwater, at the spreading corruption on both their bodies. Not enough time. Unless... I know what to do, she said quietly, but you're not going to like it. Both men turned to her. Your mother's journal speaks of a ritual, a way to temporarily become a pure Voidwalker, immune to the Butcher's corruption. But it requires... She swallowed. It requires an Alpha's willing life force. Not all of it, but enough that it might kill you anyway. Absolutely not, Thaddeus said immediately. You have another solution? She stood, facing him. Because in 3 hours we'll both be transformed. The northern packs will slaughter everyone here, and the Butchers will spread across the 7 kingdoms. We fight. The Royal Guard. Can't kill Butchers. Only a Voidwalker can, and only when fully awakened. She touched his face, surprised by her own boldness. You said you regretted not acting 3 years ago. This is your chance to act now. Captain Garrett cleared his throat. Your Majesty, there's... more. We found evidence in Marcus's quarters. Communications with the northern packs dating back years. The Omega... She wasn't randomly chosen. They knew about her bloodline. The rejection was orchestrated to keep her weak, controllable. Lyrelei felt the world tilt. They planned it? Marcus was paid to reject you, Garrett confirmed grimly, to keep you broken and hidden until they were ready to use you. The northern packs have been hunting Voidwalkers for generations, either killing them or trying to corrupt them into weapons. You're the last pure bloodline. They couldn't risk you awakening naturally. Rage, pure and clean, burned through her chest. 3 years of torture, of humiliation, of believing she was worthless, all orchestrated. Then we end this tonight, she said, her voice carrying an edge that made both Alphas step back. Perform the ritual with me, Thaddeus. Give me your life force. Let me become what they feared I always was. And if it kills me? She met his eyes steadily. Then you'll die free, as a true Alpha, not as a corrupted puppet. Isn't that better than the alternative? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you need? The ritual space was simple, a circle of salt and ash in the courtyard, moonlight streaming down. The Royal Guard formed a protective barrier around them as Lyrelei and Thaddeus knelt in the center, hands clasped. This will hurt, she warned. I've had worse. No, she said softly. You haven't. She began speaking in the old tongue, words her mother had whispered in dreams. The air grew thick, reality bending. Thaddeus gasped as his life force began flowing into her. Not his blood, but something deeper. His essence, his alpha power, his very soul pouring through their joined hands. The corruption in her arm fought back, spreading faster, racing toward her heart. But the alpha power was faster, stronger, burning through her veins like liquid starlight. Her vision fractured. She saw everything, every shadow in existence, every moment of silence that had ever been. The Butchers across the kingdom turned toward Shadowmere, sensing what was happening. The Voidwalker awakens, they whispered in unison. The last one rises. Thaddeus collapsed, his breathing shallow. She caught him, cradling his head in her lap. "Did it work?" he whispered. She looked at her arm. The corruption was frozen, held at bay by golden threads of his power woven through her skin. Not cured, but controlled. For now. Yes, but howls erupted from the perimeter. The northern packs had arrived early, and leading them, riding a corrupted wolf the size of a bear, was Cassandra. "Hello, sister-in-law," she called out mockingly. "Ready to join the family properly? One way or another, you're becoming a Ravencrest tonight." The butchers flowed around her like a dark tide, hundreds of them, all clicking in horrible harmony. Lyrelay stood, lifting Thaddeus despite his protests. Power coursed through her, void and alpha combined, shadow and light intertwined. "You want me?" she called back. "Come and claim me." The battle for Shadowmere had begun. The first wave hit like a nightmare made flesh. Lyrelay moved through the battlefield as her mother had in stories. Not quite here, not quite there, existing in the spaces between reality. A northern pack warrior's claws passed through where she'd been a heartbeat before. She solidified behind him, her own claws. When had she grown claws? Finding his throat. But for every enemy she dropped, 3 more appeared. "Fall back to the inner keep!" Captain Garrett roared, his massive gray wolf form tearing through corrupted wolves. The Royal Guard fought magnificently, but they were outnumbered 5-1. Thaddeus, despite his weakened state, had shifted into his massive black wolf, larger than any alpha had a right to be. He carved a protective circle around the injured, but Lyrelay could see him faltering. The life force he'd given her had cost him dearly. "You need to run." His voice echoed in her mind through a mate bond that shouldn't exist. They weren't mated, but the ritual had created something similar. "Take the survivors and—" "I'm not leaving you again." She phase-shifted through 3 butchers, her void-touched claws disrupting their forms. They shrieked and dissolved, but more kept coming. Always more. Lyrelay. She turned to see a young Omega servant, Sarah, who'd sometimes snuck her extra food. But Sarah was wrong now, half transformed by the butchers but not fully consumed, caught between wolf and monster. "Please," Sarah gasped, black tears streaming down her twisted face. "Kill me. Before it takes everything. I don't want to become like them." Lyrelay's hand trembled as she raised it. This girl had shown her kindness when few others had. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, "for everything you're doing. We see you now. We all see you." Lyrelay's void-touched claws ended Sarah's suffering swiftly, mercifully. The girl's body collapsed, finally free. Her scream of rage created a void pulse that cleared 30 feet around her. But the effort cost her. The corruption surged past the golden threads, spreading up her shoulder toward her neck. "Sister!" Cassandra's voice rang out mockingly. "You're weakening. The void takes as much as it gives, doesn't it? Mother never taught you that part?" The corrupted princess leaped from her mount, landing in a crater of shattered stone. Her transformation was complete now, a perfect fusion of wolf, butcher, and something worse. "You could have joined us willingly," Cassandra continued, circling Lyrelay. "Could have been a queen of shadows. Instead, you'll die protecting sheep who rejected you." "They're starting to see me now," Lyrelay said, remembering Sarah's final words. "That's more than you'll ever have, being seen for what you truly are, not what power made you become." They clashed in the center of the courtyard, void against corruption, light against twisted darkness. Cassandra was stronger, faster, more experienced, but Lyrelay had something she didn't, something worth fighting for beyond herself. Every time Cassandra's claws found flesh, Lyrelay thought of the servant still cowering in the keep. Every time the corruption spread another inch, She remembered the children in the nursery. These people had never been kind to her, but they didn't deserve slaughter. "You're fighting for nothing!" Cassandra snarled, pinning Lyreley against a wall. "They fear you. Even now, even saving them, you're still just the rejected Omega playing hero." "Maybe," Lyreley gasped, struggling against the chokehold, "but at least I'm choosing to be something more than my pain." She went void, completely incorporeal for a split second, and Cassandra's claws passed through empty air. The backlash dropped Lyreley to her knees, more corruption spreading, but she'd bought seconds. Thaddeus hit Cassandra from the side, brother and sister rolling in a tangle of fang and fury. "You always were Father's favorite," Cassandra screamed. "Perfect heir, perfect alpha, perfect everything. I never wanted—" "You never wanted, but you always had." She threw him off, her corrupted strength overwhelming. "Do you know what it's like to always be second? To know you'll never be enough no matter what you do?" Lyreley saw the opening and took it, face shifting behind Cassandra. But instead of attacking, she spoke. "Yes, I know exactly what that's like." Cassandra spun, eyes wide. "I know what it's like to be nothing. Less than nothing. To have every achievement ignored, every moment of worth dismissed." Lyreley let her void powers fade, standing vulnerable and human before the corrupted princess. But this, becoming a monster, it doesn't make you something. It just makes you nothing in a different shape. "Lies," Cassandra hissed, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "Look at yourself. Really look. Are you Cassandra Ravencrest anymore? Or are you just another butcher wearing her face?" For a moment, just a moment, Cassandra's features softened. The corruption receded slightly. I just wanted to matter." "You did matter," Thaddeus said, limping forward. "You were my sister. That mattered." "Were?" Cassandra laughed bitterly. "Past tense, because that's all I'll ever be. Your were sister. Your was family. Your used to be." The original whispering butcher materialized behind her, its talons sliding through her chest with surgical precision. "Enough sentiment," it whispered. "You've served your purpose, broken princess. Time to feed." Cassandra's eyes went wide with betrayal as the butcher began to drain her, pulling out not just life, but existence itself. She reached toward Thaddeus, mouth forming words. "Sorry, brother. Sorry," before she crumbled to ash. "One Ravencrest down," the butcher said, turning to Thaddeus. "One to go. Unless—" it looked at Lyreley. "You take his place. Full transformation, become my queen, and I spare him." "Don't," Thaddeus growled, struggling to stand. "Don't you dare." "Quiet." She touched his face gently, then looked at the butcher. "If I agree, you call off the attack? All of it? The northern packs? The other butchers? Everything?" "Lyreley, no." She pressed her fingers to Thaddeus's lips, silencing him. "You gave me your life force. Let me use it to save you." The corruption had reached her jaw now, black veins crawling up toward her eyes. She maybe had minutes before it consumed her completely. "I accept," she said to the butcher, "but on my terms. I choose the transformation. I choose what I become." The butcher tilted its head. "You think you have that power?" "I know I do." She stood, void power and alpha energy swirling around her like a storm. "I'm the last pure void walker. I carry the Alpha King's life force, and I choose to become something you've never seen before." She walked toward the butcher, each step deliberate. "I choose to become silence itself, not your puppet queen, but the absolute end of sound, the void that swallows even whispers." "Impossible. Watch me." She reached the butcher and placed her corrupted hand on its chest. Then she pulled. Not pushing power out, but pulling it in. All of it. Every butcher in the field, every whisper of corruption, every shadow of wrong. She pulled it all into herself. The butchers across the battlefield began screaming, their forms unraveling as she devoured them from the inside out. The northern pack wolves fled in terror as their corrupted allies dissolved into streams of darkness, all flowing toward Lyrelai. "What are you doing?" The original butcher tried to pull away but couldn't. She'd reversed the flow, consuming the consumer. "Something my mother figured out but was too afraid to try," Lyrelai said, her voice echoing with otherworldly power. "Taking all the corruption, all the darkness, all the wrong, and then erasing it, and myself with it. You'll die. I know." She looked back at Thaddeus one last time, memorizing his face. "Thank you for seeing me, even if it was too late." Then she shattered reality. The world went white, silent, empty. Death, Lyrelai discovered, was surprisingly noisy. She floated in a space between heartbeats, surrounded by the whispers of every sound that had ever existed. Her mother's lullabies, her own screams during the rejection, Thaddeus's voice saying her name. "You're not supposed to be here," a familiar voice said. She turned. "Could you turn when you had no body?" And saw her mother. Not as she'd died, sick and broken, but strong and whole, her Voidwalker marks glowing silver. "Mother, my brave girl, my foolish brave girl," her mother's presence wrapped around her like warmth. "You took it all into yourself. Every butcher, every corruption. Do you understand what that means? I'm dying. You're becoming." Her mother touched her, not touched. Everything was strange here, and Lyrelai saw the truth. The Voidwalker bloodline's ultimate purpose, not to hide from monsters, but to consume them, transform them. We are the universe's answer to things that shouldn't exist. But the corruption is being rewritten by your sacrifice, by the Alpha's freely given life force, by your choice to save those who rejected you. Her mother smiled. "You're not dying, my love. You're being reborn. As something new, something necessary. But Thaddeus needs you. They all do. The northern packs aren't done. This was just the first wave." Her mother began fading. "Choose, my daughter. Stay here in the silent peace, or return to the loud, messy, painful world." "That's not a choice at all." Her mother laughed, the sound like silver bells. "Number. For you, it never was." Lyrelai opened eyes she didn't remember closing. She lay in the crater where she'd consumed the butchers, naked and steaming in the cold night air. But her skin was different. Ethereal markings traced her body like living tattoos, void marks that shifted and swirled with her heartbeat. The corruption was gone, transformed into something else entirely. "Lyrelai." She turned to find Thaddeus staring at her, his face a mix of wonder and disbelief. The entire battlefield had frozen, northern pack wolves and royal guard alike gaping at her. "You died," he whispered. "I felt it. The bond, our connection. It snapped." She stood, and power rippled out from her movement. Not void, not alpha, but something between. "I got better." He laughed, actually laughed, and then he was running to her, pulling off his cloak to wrap around her shoulders, his hands checking her for injuries that no longer existed. "How?" "The Voidwalker bloodline's true purpose," she said, leaning into his warmth. "We don't just hide from monsters, we unmake them, transform them into something else." "The butchers?" "Gone. Not dead. Erased. They never existed." She touched one of the ethereal markings on her arm. "Except as these. Reminders. Power transformed from corruption to protection." A horn sounded from the northern pack lines. Their leader, Alpha Roderick, rode forward on a massive gray wolf. "The abominations are gone," he called out, "but our grievance remains. You harbor the last Voidwalker. Treaties demand her death." "Then you'll have to go through me," Thaddeus snarled, shifting partially. "And me," Captain Garrett added, the royal guard forming ranks. "And me?" a small voice said. Everyone turned to see a servant girl, barely 16, stepping out from the keep. Then another servant. Then another. The people Lyra had protected, the ones who'd never shown her kindness, were standing between her and danger. "She saved us," the girl said, voice growing stronger. "The Omega we all ignored saved us. If you want her, you fight all of Shadowmere." Roderick laughed. "Servants? You think servants will stop?" Lyrelai stepped forward, letting the cloak fall. The ethereal markings flared with power, and every wolf on the battlefield, royal, northern, dominant, submissive, dropped to their knees. Not from Alpha Command, but from something deeper, older. The recognition of something beyond their understanding. "I am not just a Voidwalker," she said, her voice carrying impossible authority. "I am what happens when you push someone past breaking and they choose to become whole anyway. I am the silence between heartbeats, the shadow between thoughts, the space between what is and what could be." She walked toward Roderick, each step leaving frost in the grass. "Your treaties are with the old bloodlines. I am something new, something you helped create with your fear and hatred. You're still just a rejected Omega." "I am the Omega who consumed 100 butchers and lived. I am the one who carries the Alpha King's willing life force in her veins. I am the bridge between void and wolf, silence and sound, nothing and everything." She stood directly before his wolf, small and naked and absolutely terrifying. "I am Lyralee Night Whisper, and I reject your authority to demand my death." The ethereal markings pulsed, and Roderick's wolf whined, submitting instinctively to something it didn't understand. "Leave," she commanded. "Take your armies and go. Tell the other northern packs what you've seen. Tell them the last Voidwalker lives, and she is done hiding." "This isn't over," Roderick managed, even as his wolf turned to flee. "No," she agreed, "but your part in it is." The northern packs fled, and suddenly Lyrelai was exhausted. The power drained out of her like water, leaving her just a woman, naked and shaking in the cold. Thaddeus caught her as she fell, cradling her against his chest. "That was incredibly dramatic," he murmured against her hair. "I learned from watching you." "Lyrelai." His voice went serious. "The bond between us, the ritual created something. Not a mate bond, but close. I need to know. Do you want me to sever it?" She pulled back to look at him. This king who'd failed her, who'd tried to make amends, who'd given his life force to save her. "Do you?" she asked. "Never." The word came out fierce, desperate. "But you deserve a choice. A real one. After everything." She kissed him. It wasn't gentle or sweet. It was 3 years of pain and rejection transformed into something fierce and claiming. When she pulled back, his eyes were gold with want. "I choose you," she said simply. "Not because you're the Alpha King, not because of the bond, but because when I was nothing, you finally saw me. Late, yes, but you saw me." "Lyrelai." "Also," she added, a smile playing at her lips, "I'm apparently some kind of void goddess now, so you should probably just accept it." He laughed and kissed her again, there in the courtyard surrounded by the injured and the awed, the servant girl who'd stood up for her crying happy tears. But in the distance, beyond the mountains, something stirred. The butchers were gone, yes, but nature abhors a vacuum, and the void Lyrali had created was already beginning to fill with something worse. 3 months later, Lyrali stood on the balcony of the Ravencrest Palace, watching the sun set over 7 kingdoms now united in wary peace. "The northern packs have officially surrendered," Thaddeus said, joining her. He wore the ceremonial robes of an Alpha King, but his crown sat crooked. She straightened it with a fond smile. "They're requesting an audience with the Void Queen." "Don't call me that." "The Silver Wolf?" "Worse. The Omega who kicked everyone's—" She laughed, turning in his arms. The mate bond hummed between them, properly formed now after a ceremony that had made history. An Alpha King taking a formerly rejected Omega as his queen and equal. "How about just Lyrali?" she suggested. "Too simple for someone who can make armies kneel with a glance." That was 1 time. 3 times, at least. The ethereal markings on her skin shimmered with amusement. They'd settled into elegant patterns now, looking like deliberate art rather than random remnants. Beautiful, if you didn't know they were formed from consumed monsters. "Your Majesties," Captain Garrett appeared in the doorway. "The council is ready." The council chamber held representatives from all 7 kingdoms, plus the new additions, the servant coalition that Lyrali had insisted on, the Omega Rights Assembly, and surprisingly, the remnant wolves, those who'd been corrupted but not fully turned during the Butcher attacks. "The reconstruction efforts in Shadowmere are complete," Garrett reported. "The memorial for Alpha Fenris has been finished and—" He paused. "Marcus's family has requested permission to attend." Lyrali felt Thaddeus tense beside her. Marcus's parents and sister had been innocent of his crimes, but the pack had shunned them anyway. "Granted," she said quietly. "They've suffered enough for his choices." "You're too forgiving," Elder Morrigan of the Eastern Pack said. "That family's son nearly destroyed us all." "And holding on to that anger helps how?" Lyrali stood, the markings responding to her emotions with a subtle glow. Marcus made his choices and paid for them. His family shouldn't carry that burden. "Spoken like a true queen," a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned as a figure entered, tall, shrouded, carrying a staff that seemed to bend light around it. "Oracle Vessa," Thaddeus said carefully. "We weren't expecting you." The oracle pulled back her hood, revealing a face marked with void scars similar to Lyrali's, but ancient, faded. "I come with a warning, young Void Walker. The vacuum you created when you consumed the butchers. It's filling." "With what?" "The silent singers. Creatures that are to butchers what butchers were to normal predators. They're coming, drawn by the void scent you've left across reality." She looked directly at Lyrali. "They come not to kill, but to worship. To make you their goddess of ending." The room erupted in concerned voices, but Lyrali held up a hand for quiet. "How long?" "Months. Maybe a year." The oracle smiled grimly. "Enough time to prepare, to grow stronger, to become what you're meant to be." "And what's that?" "The first Void Queen in 1,000 years. The bridge between our world and the silence. The one who decides if we evolve or end." She turned to leave, then paused. "Your mother would be proud." She saw this possibility but lacked the strength to achieve it. You had the strength because you knew weakness first." After the oracle left and the council dispersed, Lyrali and Thaddeus stood alone in their chambers. "No rest for the rejected," she said wryly. "You're not rejected anymore," he reminded her, pulling her close. "You're loved. By me, by the kingdoms, by the people you saved. And by the cosmic horrors coming to worship me, apparently." He laughed, pressing his forehead to hers. "We'll face them together." "Together," she agreed, then smiled. "But I'm handling the next apocalypse. You got the last one." As they kissed, the ethereal patterns on her skin pulsed with contentment. She'd been nothing, then something, then everything. And now? Now she was exactly who she chose to be. The Void Queen, the Silver Wolf, the Omega who'd save them all. But most importantly, she was Lirali Nightwhisper, and she was finally, truly, completely free. Outside, in the space between stars, something sang in frequencies only she could hear. The silent singers were coming, but this time she'd be ready. This time she wouldn't face them alone. This time the rejected would become the rejoiced.